As I said, it's been 7 long hours since the .38 pistol went off and the 2 leaders died, and that chaos has captured the city again. Now, News Scene's Peter Cleveland was just back from covering the People's Temple tragedy in Guyana. He was inside San Francisco City Hall just before 11 o'clock this morning to try to check on the big meter gate trial, the one going on all the problems over the parking meters in the city. He first had indications then that something sinister seemed to be happening inside. Let's pick up Peter right now and that report.
Just before 11 a.m., I walked off the elevator on the second floor of City Hall and was almost knocked over by police rushing into the back door of the mayor's office. The crime was seconds old. I saw the cops, then an ambulance crew rush in and turn right into the mayor's office. Then came more police and sheriff's deputies. No one knew exactly what was going on. Bit by bit, the picture got clearer. The mayor and Supervisor Harvey Milk had been shot, and incredibly, the suspect was former Supervisor Dan White. Assemblyman Willie Brown walked by me, dazed. So did Supervisor Carol Ruth Silver. Then, an ashen-faced Supervisors Board President Dianne Feinstein made the news official.
As president of the board, as president of the Board of Supervisors, it's my duty to make this announcement. Both Mayor Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk have been shot and killed. The suspect is Supervisor Dan White.
Is he in custody?
He's not at this time. Thank you very much. No questions.
Investigators were everywhere. Fire Chief Andy Casper was also brought to City Hall. No sooner had the all-point bulletin for Dan White's arrest gone out than he came in here at Northern Police Station on Ellis Street, just off Van Ness, and gave himself up. Within minutes, he was taken to the San Francisco Hall of Justice on Bryant Street. Moscone was wheeled out. I'm told he'd been shot 3 times from a .38 caliber revolver. Bullets hit him in the side, the shoulder, and the head. Sources say White appeared calm when he surrendered. His wife was driven to Northern Station, then taken to the Hall of Justice. Through our sources, it appears this is how it all happened. White reportedly walked into the mayor's outer office alone, was buzzed through the door, and walked down the long corridor to Moscone's private office and study. It was in the study, I'm told, where the shooting took place. It appears he then raced out a back door and down the corridor toward the supervisor's offices. Once there, I'm told White allegedly called Harvey Milk to his office and shot him in the head. At the Hall of Justice, White was questioned for close to 2 hours before, totally surrounded and almost invisible, he was brought out of the homicide detail and walked to the elevator for the 2-story ride to City Prison, where he remains at this hour. At the Hall of Justice, Peter Cleveland, Channel 7 News Scene.
People who saw Dan White come out of the mayor's office this morning after the shooting say that he waved and said hi and then walked off down the hall, Harvey Milk on his mind. No one knows the motive yet. If police do, they're simply not talking about it. But police officer friends of Dan White say to News Scene that he was extremely despondent of late. Indications were that the mayor had told him that he was going to reappoint him back to the supervisorial office. That was back last week. And then the mayor pulled back and decided to pick Don Horanzi instead. Reportedly, Harvey Milk had backed Horanzi's pick over White. Well, when White surrendered at San Francisco's Northern Station, where he had served himself as a police officer, police station officers say that he told them there were 9 spent shells in his left coat pocket, along with an undisclosed number of live shells. He also gave them that .38 Smith & Wesson pistol. When White's wife found out about the murder, she called well-known San Francisco criminal lawyer Jim Purcell. He is now White's attorney of record, but he was not there when White was questioned by homicide inspectors.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is Professor Hamamoto. It is December 20th, year 2022, 5:19 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Thank you for returning. Those of you who were here earlier noted that I had some kind of weird echo effect. Without going into the specifics of it, I corrected it with a simple system reboot. So let us proceed. I think this will be take 2, and it'll be even tighter than the previous performance. I led with, of course, the live, I guess they interrupted whatever was going on. I think it was broadcast at 11 a.m. in the afternoon. They broke into the regular broadcasting day and covered the events at the City Hall in the city of San Francisco, California. This is back in November of 1978. And as I was saying in the previous talk, if you missed it because of the echo problems, this was only 9 days after the tragedy at Guyana, the Guyana so-called Jonestown agricultural project. And if you want to listen to that talk, I think it was a week ago already, I gave or maybe it's 2 weeks, I gave a talk or we discussed the anniversary of the Jonestown massacre, where over 900 people took their own lives or they were shot in some cases at this commune where, according to Michael Myers, Meiers, and again, this is in a previous talk of mine if you want to check it out. I don't have time to review it. But in this book that he published called Was Jonestown a CIA Plot or Operation? Something like that. He explores the thesis, the argument, which is a compelling one from my perspective. He goes into the details of the people who were involved in so-called the Jonestown agricultural project, and he points the finger at the Central Intelligence Agency for having brought to the fore that agglomeration of people that the Reverend Jim Jones had gathered together and transported them wholesale over to Guyana, which is in South America, to a friendly government, because it seems that his operation, the so-called People's Temple, was starting to get bad publicity. Jones and his minions were no longer able to contain the image that he had assiduously cultivated when he first hit town. And of course, he comes from Indiana originally. He had some roots and some church dealings there, but he eventually severed them and he relocated to the San Francisco Bay Area. And for those of you who have read the John O'Neill book, Chaos, and have read other scholarship and literature on it, you know that starting around the late 50s and certainly through the 60s, the intelligence agencies, not just the American ones, by the way, but for our purposes, we're talking about the alphabet agencies of the United States of America, took a keen interest in the Bay Area in specific. And in retrospect, I think a lot of it had to do with the prep work that was necessary in order to bring in what is now known as Silicon Valley, or DARPA Valley, or Pentagon Valley, or NATO Valley, right? The whole intelligence infrastructure that we are now seeing its full flower. We now understand it was not just to bring us email and entertainment and educate the population. It was intended at the outset, because of its history with ARPANET and DARPANET, it was intended from the very beginning to be a military infrastructure that would eventually enslave not just America, but the entire world. And we saw this roll out in earnest over the past 2 years. So this happened only 9 days after Jonestown, and there was a person over at UC Davis. I taught there for 21 years, and I was on a committee with this gentleman, Professor John R. Hall, who devoted a good deal of his professional career to documenting what went on in Jonestown. Now, the history that he records is excellent. A lot of the empirical work he does is sound. It's not just armchair scholarship. However, where I differ with Professor Hall is that I do believe this Jonestown, so-called, was an intelligence operation. He denies it. He dismisses it in the typical academic cavalier fashion. It's a conspiracy theory, and it's part of the paranoid style in American politics, right? The famous essay by the political scientist at Columbia University by Richard Hofstadter. And that's supposed to satisfy us. It doesn't really anymore. I don't think it even satisfies the so-called professional people. ladies and gentlemen here in the chat room, you're going to see more and more professional people come over to our way of thinking and understanding and viewing the world. I'm not laughing. I'm just at the situation. I'm just kind of tickled by the irony of it all, because we've gone to becoming zeros to heroes in a certain fashion. Speaking of which, I'll make a quick pitch for this book that I received thanks to my Patreon sponsors, by Edward Dowd. You've no doubt seen him. You would recognize him if you saw him on the media. His name might not mean anything to you, but he was a top executive in forecasting with BlackRock, right? And just leave aside the fact that BlackRock has this reputation, deservedly so, of gaming the entire world financial system for its own benefit, the benefit of its stockholders. But Edward Dowd began to see anomalies in the society, and he was a statistician, a forecaster, economic forecaster, an excellent one from what I understand. And he wrote this book. It just came out. It's called Cause Unknown: The Epidemic of Sudden Deaths in 2021 and 2022. Highly recommended. I'm not going to go into a critique right now because I don't want to be deplatformed from TubeView, but I would just say that check this book out for yourself, and also check out Edward Dowd. He's all over different independent media venues. This is another book published by Skyhorse, which has been doing the Children's Health Fund publications. The most probably the most notable one is the book authored by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's been very aggressive in pursuing the truth for this operation that we've endured for the past 2.5 years or so. So I'm just mentioning this is because, again, the momentum is shifting. It's shifting in the direction of truth, and people like John Hall, who are really hired in the academic. By the way, there's a number of them I've found out over the past several years at UC Davis in specific, right? And there's historical reasons for that I won't get into. But there are a couple of others. There's 3 people that I'll be talking about later, at least, maybe half a dozen, maybe a dozen. I don't know them all, who seem to have been specifically recruited to the University of California, Davis, to knock down any sort of conspiratorial, quote unquote, conspiratorial scholarship that comes down the pike. And it just so happens that's that's the very campus that I had 21 years of my career. So I was right in the belly of the beast. I couldn't, and my own attorney, who I later parted ways with, could not really understand why such a podunky campus, UC Davis, would be so especially strict in containing people like me. He could understand it if I was at Berkeley or UCLA, but Davis not. But that's the way it functions. And I'll just say that UC Davis, there's a lot more there than meets the eye. And that's exactly why a lot of these operations were run out of Davis. And that's why they hired people in order to contain. There's a woman that was in the history department, for example, who was an undergraduate at UC Davis. Then I think she got an MA there. Then she got a PhD. Then I think she married one of the professors. And then she wound up being the department chair. And then my first encounter with her was then when she was appointed to head an investigation on guess who? On me. So they grew their own at UC Davis. I forgot her last name. I can't remember. Her first book, it's pretty weak, but at least her specialty was conspiracy theory, by the way. Her first book was somewhat open to it by the time she was rising through the ranks by having screwed her way to the top, I guess. Very attractive lady, very intelligent, and very professional, just the ideal person for a type of academic hangout that proliferate in the university. That's why the university has been able to produce or be the home for all these incredible technologies that are being used against us. It's an incubator for that. And now I understand that within the faculty ranks themselves, they stock it with people like John Hall, who is in the sociology department, in order to tamp down any sort of dissent or any sort of independent inquiry. So she went after me, and anyway, part of the story. Maybe I'll talk about her work a little bit later. She does have a few modest publications, which are really terrible in scholarship, but these are the type of people that are employed. Now, you don't have to be a genius. You can be a Willie Brown of average intelligence, who we're going to use today as sort of a jumping off point to understand the new world order of 2022 going on 2023. He is one of the key individuals in the American political scene who has shepherded this progress, well, I won't call it progress, more like regression back to barbarity. But no one really pays him any serious attention. Willie Brown, okay, he's kind of a joke, right? He even did a cameo in The Princess Diaries, where he said, "It don't come down on Willie Brown," right? He's rhyming like Johnny Cochran. If it don't fit, quit, right? This is how we, typically play down or play off African American popular culture. Well, they like to rhyme and dance and boogaloo and entertain. But you know what? As I'll get into in a moment, you and me, the world is dealing with a far more formidable source of power and leverage than you would ever imagine. And I know this from my study of the Black fraternities and sororities. If you want to check back on the playlist, which is hard to find purposely because of TubeU shadow banning me, and check out the Kamala Harris ones where I talk about her relationship with her sorors. That's what they're called. That's not my term. They made it up themselves. The ones that are rocking the pearls and the pink carnations and roses. It's powerful female organization, secret society. It has a public face, but it's a secret society. It requires initiation, hazing, trauma-based mind control, as the phrase goes, which I've talked about in previous presentations here that you want to check out. A lot of the Black sorority sisters to this day really resent the type of ritual humiliation they had to go through in order to be accepted and rise through the power hierarchy. And Kamala Harris had to do the same in order for her to attain the vice presidency and possibly the presidency, the highest elective office of the land. And after that, she's still fairly young. She'll be a full-fledged globalist. And who was the one who groomed her to ascend to that status? It was none other than Willie Brown. Now, the definitive source that I've looked at, this is a University of California press. It's a university press. It's an academic press. So whoever edited it and approved publication of Willie Brown and a biography had certain standards that had to be met in order for this study to take place. And it's a good one, I'd have to say. Let's see. Oh, okay. He's a writer with the Sacramento Bee, and I've had some dealings with him, both good and bad. But James Richardson did a pretty good job here with it. And this is my primary source of biographical work on Willie Brown in one place. Now, having said that, I believe that Willie Brown requires a more critical biography because of the case that I'm about to make here is him being one of the top 10 fixers, right? He's a big baller, man. One of the top 10 fixers of our period of time here going into the turbulent 60s, and he's sort of like the eminence grise today, right? The gray eminence of 2022, 2023, even now, although I don't know how much real clout he has anymore, but certainly for a number of important decades, transformative decades, not just in the San Francisco city and county, but also through the entire region in the world, because again, of the technological implantation of this surveillance technology that comes under the rubric of Silicon Valley, right? That you have the triangle, you've got Berkeley, to the north, you've got Stanford to the south, and you have me, UC Davis, over to the east that creates a sort of a technological triangle there. And in a wild and woolly gold rush town that's legendary for its excesses and liberal politics, which is all a veneer for the more nefarious dark politics that are taking place in this area. And as I mentioned before, like in the broadcast that was not functioning correctly here, San Francisco is the financial capital of the state of California. It's probably the financial capital of the far west. There's a Pacific Stock Exchange. Doesn't get a lot of press. There's a U.S. Federal Reserve in San Francisco. It's a thoroughly Masonic city from probably the gold rush days, probably even before that, in order to fund the capital necessary to send people over here to capitalize on the opium trade between what later became America. We're talking about, colonial California when it was still under Spanish rule and Mexican rule. Prior to the gold rush even, right? We're talking about the opium trade, which was dominated by New England families of the state of Massachusetts, for example. But I also saw something interesting so far as these trading routes from San Francisco to China, Canton in particular, right? Guangdong province. And that's the city of Baltimore. And now I'm beginning to understand why Nancy Pelosi was sent out west for La Familia D'Alessandro from Philadelphia to send out to San Francisco to kind of close that loop, right? Just like the mafia had outlets not just in the five families with New York, but they went to the far west, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, and global places like Macau and such on. This is the type of network we're talking about, right? So it's not a one-off, it's not sui generis or one of a kind, and it's not just about these glamorous personalities like Willie Brown and Kamala Harris, and we know all about their relationship and their affair and whatnot. You can read that on your own time. I'm saying that's just sort of it's TMZ bait, Harvey Levin's show. It's National Enquirer bait to really dig into the salacious so that the real politics, the geopolitical arrangements and deal making that's going on behind that. So that's obscured, right? Not that I don't enjoy a good story and the good gossip and reading all these salacious magazines and whoever it might be, right? Because so far as I'm concerned, that's part of the intelligence work that's required in cultural forensics, and sometimes it's some of the more enjoyable elements of it. I have to say that I have a certain respect and even fondness for someone like Willie Brown, because unlike most of these sanctimonious, self-righteous elective officials or appointed type people, he's very clear in what he wants. It's self-aggrandizement. He has no compunctions about buying expensive foreign automobiles, two-seater, sports cars, Porsche. I think he had a Ferrari or something, and just flaunt it right in public. In fact, he's so committed to foreign luxury automobiles that one of the stories about him and Kamala Harris is that while she was going through her apprenticeship, the grooming, right, Willie Brown bought her a BMW. Fine. Okay. I'm sure that happens all the time. I'm a big boy. You're a big boy. You're and a big girl. You know that happens. Now, where I draw the line, however, is when Willie Brown, towards the end of his public life, he was out of elective office by this point, concludes his public service to opining about the crisis of the past 2.5 years, which he says from the sidelines, this is much worse that I've seen since 9/11, which he was mayor at the time when, I was driving across the Golden Gate Bridge with a friend who was visiting from Japan, and it was dark. I'd never seen the Golden Gate Bridge dark, and it was because supposedly there was an imminent attack by some sort of foreign terrorist. And you know the whole 9/11 story by now, so I don't have to rehearse it. But Willie Brown was mayor at the time, just like he was in City Hall visiting with Mayor George Moscone just 15 minutes before Dan White came in and shot the mayor, Moscone, who was buddy-buddy with Willie Brown. They went to law school together, the University of California Law School, not Berkeley, but Hastings. Hastings is in San Francisco proper. Berkeley is across the bay. It's in Berkeley, California, across the San Francisco Bay. That's the elite school. Hastings is the school for the more, let's say, I wouldn't say working class people, but the people who are ambitious and on the rise, people like Willie Brown and Moscone. And they were tight because they were working, supposedly, this, might be just BS, right? But they supposedly worked as janitors during the nighttime at Hastings Law School, pushing brooms so they could help pay for their tuition. It seems like a plausible story because, you know what? American education, up until very recently, really did provide an opportunity for people who came from dirt to rise through society. That's changing now. It's undergoing a radical transformation, but that's another story there. And I mention this because you say, well, Willie Brown, he went to law school. He's brilliant. He himself tells in his own oral history, says that it wasn't really that much of an accomplishment. Indeed, the main reason he went to law school is so that he can get out of the draft. All right. Because this is during, I guess, the latter part of the Korean War, or maybe the early parts of, well, he was draft age. They were still drafting. The Selective Service was still drafting people. And you just saw that as a dodge, as a way out. And apparently he had a gift for it. He's not stupid. He's a very bright guy. And he speaks in standard English. He doesn't speak the dialect of his people back in Texas. He comes from a large family. He loves his mama and is very proud of his upbringing and his roots down in the South. Okay, let me quickly go through a montage that I went through so you'll know the faces of some of the people that I'm referring to. That's Willie Brown himself. I don't know how long ago this was, but he's always got a good smile, and he's well known for his clothes. I did have a physical contact with Willie Brown once on the street. It wasn't like a Kamala Harris type deal, but he reached out and shook my hand, and I took it and shook his hand. His hands were rough. I would think a guy like him who really cares about his physical appearance, he's in good shape. Even today, he cuts a good physical figure, but his hands were rough. He needed a manicure, but his hands were big. They were big like a fullback or a linebacker or a split end, someone who catches the ball. I don't know if he was an athlete. He might have been, but so he's a kingpin. Yeah. In the Ghetto, the Urban Dictionary, it's the head of an organization. But unlike any of these people who are involved in organized crime, nothing has ever besmirched the career of Willie Brown, not even close. He was a king of ethnic politics. This is at a Filipino-American social event. I would think it's about time for a Filipino-American mayor of San Francisco. They've been in the city since the gold rush times, but there never has been an Asian-American mayor in San Francisco, even though 30% of the population is Asian. And there's reasons for that. For that power imbalance, which I'll go into perhaps if I have time later. So here he is, and here he is with Robert F. Kennedy, right, Sr. This must have been during the California primary season. This is 1968. And most of you know he was assassinated at the Ambassador Hotel, supposedly by Sirhan Bishara Sirhan. And to the right of our beloved Robert F. Kennedy is Willie Brown, Esquire. I guess he was a supervisor in San Francisco around that time. So early on, he was rubbing shoulders with the elite within the American political system, which further argues for the fact that he needs a critical biography and assessment of his career rather than just being a novelty figure, but being a mover and shaker in the New World Order in its inception. And with one of his imported sports cars, I think that's a Porsche, I don't know, what's a 911 or something. Very proud of his wheels. By the way, he started making money after he graduated from Hastings. According to him, corporations would hire a colored man, so he was forced to defend pimps and drug dealers and the criminal element. You know what? They deserve legal representation. I agree with that principle, but I wouldn't cry for Willie Brown because some of the people who are sporting men, they got a lot of money. They will pay you in cash. So far as livelihood's concerned, you can read about it here. You can talk about how he came out of nowhere to become a celebrity, a celebrity attorney. And then, of course, he started getting the big corporate clients once he was getting into the state house, right? He was the Speaker of House California for many years. And once he gained that level of political influence, all the big companies started coming to him, and his partners were very happy with Willie Brown. And then, as I told you before, Willie Brown had the uncanny knack for being around people and persons and situations that turn out to be incredibly chaos ridden. I'm using a pun for that Operation Chaos, right? With is it Tim O'Neill who wrote that? But one of the notorious figures that he was very close to is the man on the left, and that's none other than the Reverend Jim Jones. And right, as in the Promised Land. And I gave a talk, or have mentioned on many occasions, the Jonestown experiment, which was according to Michael Myers, a CIA operation. But he presented it as a church. Willie Brown is in the middle, and he never distanced himself from Jim Jones. He showed support for him. Even after the massacre, he really didn't run away from it. He just about any sort of intimate knowledge of Jonestown, he managed to wiggle his way out of it. Now, the reason why I keep mentioning Willie Brown in conjunction with all of these tragedies like Guyana, like the assassination of George Moscone at the City Hall of San Francisco, and later with the 9/11 attacks, right, when he was mayor, and then most recently, although he's out of elective office, the most recent crisis that was, as we are now finding out, engineered. He's always the man on the spot there. So, well, I forgot in the previous talk I gave. I'm glad I'm recording this because, the second time is allows me to assimilate this information that I've been going through recently. But I didn't mention last time that Willie Brown, this is the Willie Brown who was given 24 hours ahead of time the warning not to fly to New York on September 11th, 2001. Now, more recently, they've rewritten the story saying that, well, he was on the way to the airport when he got the call, and then he turned around. But the earlier version of it was that he got a call before the whole scenario laid out. So, and it's still, in either scenario you want to pick, still it's unclear who gave Willie Brown the call. He doesn't even know for sure. At least he pretends not to know, but he was given forewarning that something was going down. Now, how feasible is it that one individual, such as a Willie Brown, could be in all these different crisis situations over and over again? Right. And he's still alive, right? He seems to be quite healthy and robust currently. So, man, just instead of checking out the Groundhog Day, check out Willie Brown, see where he's heading, see where he's going. If he's heading out of the country, heading for the hills, or is bugging out to New Zealand with Peter Jackson, then we know that something's about ready to go down. So I'm watching Willie Brown. Maybe there should be a Willie Brown tracking system. Anybody see him on the street at a restaurant? Okay, cool, we're fine. But if he kind of disappears for a day or so, then we know something's about to happen. So that's him in the middle. And the person on the right, most of you don't know, is Mervyn Dimely. He was a big powerhouse in the California state legislature. Right. Okay, let me finish up here, and I'll go into the fraternities, which is really the power base of these individuals. This is a fine book. I didn't really get a chance to go through it, but I draw a lot of the ancillary material that I'm relating here, and I wanted to properly credit Daniel J. Flynn for a lot of his original insights. A lot of the reportage, it's decades old, but he assimilates it and it reassembles it and synthesizes it in a way that makes much more sense. This is the fame in the middle, Golden Gate Bridge, which connects San Francisco to Marin County across the San Francisco Bay. And the person on the left is Reverend Jim Jones with his priestly collar. And on the right is Harvey Milk, who was the other person who was assassinated by Dan White on that 9 days after the Guyana massacre. And Marin County to the right, that's Robin Williams' land. You want to check the talk I gave on that. And I most likely will be having one or two people from my Patreon group. I'm going to patch them in to talk a little bit about their own perceptions of Marin County, the schools there, the society, the culture, and especially of that time. I think it's really important to understand. Call it milieu studies. I think it's very important to understand the substance and the subjective aspects of life in this area, instead of depending on, let's say, someone like Dave McGowan, who in an armchair fashion claims that there's incredible music community called Laurel Canyon just unfolded because of CIA control. And there's still McGowan heads out there who believe that. He lived in LA. He worked in LA, but never once did he ever visit Laurel Canyon. You can just drive there. You don't even have to get out of the car. You can drive down. He didn't even do that. That kind of sounds, it sounds fishy. It's also pretty lazy reportage, and it's not the type of reportage or work that I have much respect for. I much prefer Daniel J. Flynn, who pounds the pavement and lives this reality that he's reporting on. Okay, let me continue then. That's enough of a tribute to Cult City, recommended reading. So we'll get off of the same old. And then here's another Willie. He requires no introduction to the left. He's probably pointing to one of his victims of sexual assault out there. And then there's the other Willie to the right, having a good laugh at it. Yeah. Always spiffily attired, right? He's famous for his bespoke suits, as well as his expensive automobiles. And the white woman on the right is, believe it or not, Kamala Harris. This is before she became black. I think Willie Brown and others probably got to her very early and said, well, girlfriend, you need to go to historically black college. We're going to send you to Howard in Washington, D.C., and we're going to enroll you in the elite Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. And from there, we're going to groom you into becoming the first black female president of the United States. Now, Michelle Obama might have something to say about that, but typically they like to have two horses in the run, right? Just so you got to back up, right? And they also have like a fake competition between the two. So that's Kamala Harris, and you know the story about how they got together and how Willie Brown kind of feels resentful that she's made it to higher office than he did, right? The student has outperformed the master. And I think that's one of the reasons why he started yapping away about his relationship, his mentorship of Kamala Harris. Maybe it'll get him new girlfriends too. I don't know. But he's a kiss and tell. Gentlemen don't do that. She's not a gentleman. Started talking about, yeah, me and Cammy, there they are at some kind of social event. He was married, by the way, if that offends you in any fashion, and there's all kinds of stories and legends behind that. I won't belabor it. He's married. He's not a single man, although he rocked the world like he was a single man, player man, big balla with Cammy, showing the décolletage. And okay, yeah, so he's kind of miffed that he's left behind, and Kamala Harris is trying to play down the relationship and the student-teacher tutelage going on there. And so he's the guy that's the source of all these quote-unquote leaks about their relationship. And they're going to resurface when she runs for president, I'm sure. Here they are sharing a cackle. There she's on the left, and there's Willie Brown on the right. She's a woman on the rise, man. And that ambition, you could just smell it from here. You can feel, man, it's incredible. People get off on this. You and me, normies, right? We don't understand. Well, we do kind of understand it on, intellectually, how these people get off on each other, right? But on an experiential level, we don't understand the attraction that this life holds for them, other than the fabulous riches that they enjoy, supposedly. I don't know. I'm having a lot of fun with you here on this evening doing this second show. I like this lifestyle of mine, as impoverished as it is. Well, anyway, enough pity for myself. What is at the top here? We know that these people are figureheads, high-level figureheads, albeit, but it's really the fiat lux, right? That means let there be light, or the power of light. And this gentleman here formed a lodge directly under the administration of the Grand Lodge of England in London. And I don't know the reasons for that, but I was surprised to see that this lodge is so new. But the point is that this fiat lux power arrangement dynamic, which pervades San Francisco politics, California politics, U.S. politics, and world politics. It would be really interesting to see the influence of Freemasonry in Russia. I have an suspicion that a lot of those Freemasonic oligarchs were kicked out of probably during the Soviet period, and that's one of the reasons for this continued hostility against Russia, and before that, the Soviet Union. But anyway, that's an aside. Fiat lux. Remember that as this expression, this motto, fiat lux. This is the lodge in D.C., appropriately enough, because fiat lux is also the official motto of the University of California. Let there be light. What kind of light are they talking about? Are they talking about the light of God? The light of Jesus? Are they talking about the light that's generated by the Abrahamic bloodlines? No, I suspect they're talking about the Illuminati light that the Freemasonic in California is very much a Freemasonic state. And you could bet your bottom dollar that the University of California at the highest level is guided by the Illuminati / Freemasonic, Rosicrucian, OTO, AMORC. They all kind of converge, and they also have their tensions at a certain level. Secret societies. And by the way, I also came to the recent realization that the so-called Divine Nine, the sororities and fraternities of the historically Black colleges and universities, I believe that these college fraternities and sororities are not auxiliaries, not feeders, but extensions of Freemasonic for grown-up people, postgraduate Freemasonry. And that's why you see a crossover in rituals, regalia, and strategies, which is to keep it family, man. Keep it Keep it all in the family. And by the way, I think I might have mentioned this already, but excuse me if I have. Kamala Harris went to Hastings. Moscone was at Hastings when Willie Brown was there. And the University of California, Ed Lee, who was the mayor of Chinese American, by the way, before he was afflicted with a sudden heart attack, and that's another talk. I gave some indication of that in the previous talk. I eliminated here because I was going way over time and I was straying off course from Willie Brown, right? But he went to UC Berkeley. Most of the power establishment who are in the California state legislature have gone to either Stanford or UC law schools. And you can see then that there's a consistency of power arrangements. No matter what their race, ethnicity, or gender might be, they all come from the same illuminist framework of how civil society is to be governed. It's to be ruled over by a selective, self-selected elite, like W.E.B. Du Bois, who was Alpha Pi Alpha, I believe, according to this book. He had this concept, Du Bois, who is black, right? He looks like a white man, but he's black. He's high yellow, right? He had this notion of the talented 10th, right? 90% of the African-American population is, well, they're just going to, whatever. He didn't go into the details, but you're seeing some aspects of it even till today. Right, non-educated, underachiever, not even in the working class, not even working, but they're going to be written over by the talented 10th. That was his phrase. Booker T. Washington famously disagreed with him, saying that we need to train all African-American people to be self-sufficient, farming, home crafts, industry, small industry, entrepreneurialism, develop their own. He's kind of like Kanye West. Right, Kanye West, his parents were educators. I'm sure he's well acquainted with the ideas of Booker T. Washington. Anyway, so there's an elitism there that derives from the black leadership. Let's see what else we have here. Oh, I should tell you, this is one of the entrances to the University of California, Hastings College of Law. In a great achievement for equality and for grappling, I'm being sarcastic, as you can tell, for grappling honestly with our legacy of genocide against Native peoples, against people of color. The Board of Regents and whoever's the governing body of the University of California, Hastings College have decided to remove the Hastings name from the College of Law because apparently he was into Native American genocide. He probably was. That's really the story of the state of California, from Native America to your Chinese, to your Japanese immigrants, to Mexican people, on and on and on. So maybe they should have just left it on there as a reminder. But they're taking it as of January 1st, 2023. They're going to be ripping down that, or at least chiseling off the little letters from the law school. That's where Willie Brown went. And Kamala Harris, they were both silent about that. Anyway, curious aside. And then you know who that is, right? This is the most recent crisis that Willie Brown weighed in on. Here he has an editorial piece that it was in the San Francisco Chronicle, I guess it was. I ran San Francisco after 9/11. Yeah, he sure did. He was mayor. And this is worse. He's referring to, the lockdown. So he's still a player, or at least in his own mind he is. I'd say he still has some sort of influence. And let me move next to the other video, which shows you, by the way, you got to look at it real quick, but this is the setting that Willie Brown is most comfortable in. These old wood-paneled, dark, seems like early 20th century San Francisco eateries, right? Like Coletto. Maybe Coletto's too working class for them, but he probably went to some of the more trendy bistros as well. He's a real boulevardier, as they call it. That's Willie Brown. But check out his environment, and I'll explain to you who he's talking about in this this clip here.
Get it right in recalling Chesa Boudin.
Absolutely, because he only got 36% of the votes to get elected. And in this stupid ranked choice concept that we have in this town, you're always going to get some odd.
Okay, they have him there talking about Chesa Boudin, or Boudin, if you will, but that's the key name there. He was elected district attorney, right? Not even 40% of the vote, but he was recalled not that long ago. 55% of those who voted said, we don't want no Chesa Boudin or Boudin. Now, you would think, okay, just city politics, but let's delve into the backstory here. Chesa Boudin is the adopted son of one Bill Ayers Jr., right? He's the guy that helped write, or maybe he ghostwrote the whole 2 volumes of the memoirs from my father, right? The books that got Barack Hussein Obama elected. He was a protege of Bill Ayers and his machine based in Chicago, right? With his wife, Bernadine Dorn. And they were both convicted weather underground people. They were on the run, right? Ayers went on to get a PhD in education and had a job as a professor at the University of Illinois, Chicago. And Bernadine Dorn was a law professor and did social justice projects. But their real purpose is to work on behalf of the social anarchist communist underground that's been around since their parents' or grandparents' time. You know, they probably came from Kiev or the Ukraine and brought their, Sabbatean Frankist politics into America. There's that continuity that has to be broken before America heals. All right, let's be honest about it. Right, the whole Sabbatean Frankist culture and politics has to be broken and disestablished before America really comes into its own, right? And they were put here to test us as a nation. That's my argument, right? In a nutshell. But they come out of that bag. So who did they adopt Chesa Boudin from? Well, it was Kathy Boudin. I remember all these people reading about them when I was a kid. You know, the Weather Underground blowing up houses and robbing banks for the revolution. And as we know now from the scholarship that has subsequently been produced, not even scholarship, it's mostly independent writers. That's why I'm into independent writers like Leo Zagami, who's going to be back with us on Thursday, by the way, because they do not hew to an orthodoxy. But the independent writers and journalists, Kirby Summers is another one of my faves. I got a ton of them. I don't want to consume too much time. I like to get, writers of that quality on my show, and the academic ones don't really hold a candle to them so far as I'm concerned. But they're the ones, right? Daniel Flynn being one of them also. They are the ones that show us that people like the Billy Boy Ayers Jr. and Dorn and Kathy Boudin and the Weather, who also, and the Manson family, they all come from wealthy families, right? They're not well, they might be dysfunctional, but they're all wealthy and privileged. These were all the coterie of the elite. They're creation of capitalists themselves. They rock the communism, the social democracy, the social anarchism, I guess the Noam Chomsky line and all that. But most of them come from super, super, uber wealthy, privileged families. And they over-identify with Negroes or Mexicans, and they try to do that with the Asians. But the Asians said, we don't need you, man. We don't want you. We know your game. We know you went over to China to try to almost succeed in destroying the Chinese people. We know who was behind all these world wars. So they try to, that's why there's open borders, and they want to bring in immigrant people who they can go and work their game for the next generation. These are your Chesa Boudin, right? And by the way, I checked his resume. He went to Yale Law School. He also did post-law school. This is always a dead giveaway for someone who works for the Rothschilds or the Bank of England, but he did a postgraduate work at Oxford or Cambridge, something like that, right? So did well, it wasn't Harris, but a lot of these people do a year or two. Oh, Ed Lee, the mayor who I think was murdered before the current woman, what's her name? Breed, right? The woman. I don't know what race she is. I think she's African American. Uh, Ed Lee dropped dead of a heart attack. He came out of Berkeley, as I mentioned, but he also went to an elite school in Maine. Now, this is the son of an immigrant from Guangdong. So he was creamed. I'm not saying the Asians are good because the blacks have been positioned as being the kingmakers in San Francisco. I'm saying they're all competing gangsters amongst themselves. And then Ed Lee himself went to do some postgraduate after law school, did some work in England under a fellowship, getting paid quite a bit, a stipend to do work that was not even related to academic work. Right? This is the training, the grooming program here. And the sooner we understand the finer points via cultural forensics of how these people come to the fore, the better able we're going to be able to break the bonds of this type of slavery that we think is just related to personality, like Willie Brown, Slick Willie, or Kamala Harris. It goes deeper than that. All right. We're talking about structural, transgenerational pathologies that are communicated through their secret societies and their symbologies and their familiar relationships, their marriages, their affairs, you name it. Right. Okay. So let me conclude then with just a brief overview of this secret society that Willie Brown comes out of. And this is why I decided that I needed to go into Willie Brown and promote him as one of the most important political figures, top 10 of our lifetime. Willie Brown and the assassination of George Moscone and Harvey Milk as being one of the more important political assassinations in American political history. Right. And that includes the assassination of JFK, Robert F. Kennedy, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., George Wallace. That assassination in City Hall has to be considered as part of that system, that network, that octopus, if you will. It's that important. I want to put it on a historiographic agenda for younger, more ambitious, and open-minded historians to really look at it as being the work, the assassination of George Moscone and Harvey Milk, as being more than the work of a guy named Dan White who was overdosing on Twinkies and Coca-Cola. The famous Twinkie defense comes from that particular case. They always throw some weird stuff like that. That was a purging of the old school San Francisco politics. And San Francisco was going to be the technological as well as cultural and social engineered vanguard of the New World Order. And it was not going to do to have people like Moscone, who came from Italian-American working class roots, and these other characters, right? Irish-American, very strong. Did you know Joe DiMaggio and Dominic DiMaggio? They're from San Francisco, man. Very strong, Italiano, right? I've been by the church, by the way, where Jolt and Joe got married to Marilyn. San Francisco is an incredible city, but it underwent a revision starting around Jonestown time and the assassination in San Francisco, leaving this whole power vacuum to bring in new people like you saw her, Dianne Feinstein, Jackie Spear, and a new generation of globalists to steer America into this larger. And, the United Nations was founded in San Francisco. It's right, there's United Nations Plaza, right? And San Francisco is about conquering the rest of the world, Asia, right? It was pointed in that direction. The same families that were involved in opium and the trade, slave, sex, and human trade, and the wars were really trying to conquer the Asian continent and its people. So that's why strategically it's always been important. And unfortunately, it's just the focus of the GLBTQ consciousness, or if you're not into it, you laugh about it and you think, well, that's San Francisco, right? It's a city of fruits and nuts. But as I'm trying to lay out here, it's deserving of far deeper, more intense scrutiny. And I have all the faith in the world that there are people, millennials especially, who are going to dig deeper into this political history. And I'm looking forward to your findings. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I conclude the second edition of today's live talk. And I really appreciate all of you in the live chat. Please share this. I'm going to be revisiting this topic here. I'm going to be introducing more politics of the far west of California and how it intersects with Asia, because most people, even in indie media, are still like in the Alex Jones level, right? With their 40s and 50s conceptions of what China, the Chi-Coms are. Okay, get over it. It's 2023 almost, right? And we need to really sit down together and figure this out so that we can at least achieve some parity in political economic strength and influence. All right, I'm looking forward to the struggle ahead in 2023. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate your tolerance and your patience with my technical issues earlier. Thank you. Bye.